Main event of the evening.
These days are
Hello and welcome to These Days Are Ours, a Happy Days podcast. I'm Peter.
And I'm Joe.
And today we will be discussing Season 6, Episode 14, The Magic Show.
Okay, Peter, tell us what happens in The Magic Show.
We open with a statement that all magic tricks in this episode were done live.
In this episode of Happy Days, there was no trick photography used.
Then we join Howard, Marion, and Al in the Cunningham living room, being interviewed by George Fenneman for the radio.
Hello, Mr. and Mrs. Milwaukee. This is George Fenneman, your roving reporter, and right now we're broadcasting live from the home of Howard and Marion Cunningham.
The Leopard Lodge is holding its annual fundraiser dinner show for the Sunnyside Orphanage tomorrow at the Pfister Hotel. Al is too nervous to say anything, so Howard talks about the dinner and the magic show to be performed by the incredible Crustini. He'll even be doing his most famous trick,
The famous milk can escape.
Louie and Louise, two children from the orphanage who have been sitting in the background of the scene like two creepy ghosts, say how much they like magic.
Magic's neat. I'm Louie.
And then Al grabs the microphone and tries to tell Rosa Coletti that if she's listening, all is forgiven. Then Fonzie shows up and gives his own spiel about the benefit. And then Richie and Joni show up, and Richie cracks a joke about Louie and Louise, replacing him and Joni.
Joni, look at this. We've been replaced.
And then Ralph and Potsy, who heard the interview on the car radio, join them, and Potsy grabs the microphone to sing Venus, and Ralph starts to tell a joke about two giraffes.
Venus, goddess of love that you are. Two giraffes meet on the street.
Ralph!
As they play tug of war with the microphone, the radio equipment suddenly explodes. Later that day, Marion gets a phone call. The great Crustini is in the hospital for injuries sustained practicing the milk can escape.
Oh my, that's terrible. Yes, we understand.
Howard is horrified. Without a magician for tomorrow's benefit, the Lodge is going to demote him to Fez checker again. Fonzie convinces them not to give up by asking Louie and Louise about what the money would be used for. Repairs on the leaky roof, new beds, and an Alvin and the Chipmunks record to replace the one they have that got worn out. They need to do this. And Fonzie has the ideal replacement in mind, the amazing Randy.
The escape artist par excellence, the primo magician in the world.
You hear that, Dad? He knows the escape artist par excellence, primo magician in the whole world. Is he any good?
Howard gives Richie a contract, and he goes to drive down to Chicago with Ralph and Potsy. Then he quickly returns to ask Fonzie where in Chicago the amazing Randy is, and then a second time to borrow money from Howard. Richie, Ralph, and Potsy arrive at the amazing Randy's hotel room to find it seemingly empty. So of course Ralph and Potsy start playing with Randy's stuff. After briefly locking Ralph in one of those devices that splits you into three pieces, they have to get rid of a hat that keeps spilling streamers.
Hey, a magic hat.
Oh, Potsy, don't touch that stuff, okay?
Come on, Potsy, let's see you pull a rabbit out of it. I can't, it's empty.
The trio decide to throw it out the window, and upon opening the curtains come face to face with the amazing Randy, hanging upside down in a straitjacket outside.
Sir, why are you hanging upside down in a straitjacket 14 stories over Michigan Avenue?
It's 2 o'clock.
Fonzie talked to him earlier, and he would be happy to do the benefit. He signs the contract, still in his straitjacket. The night of the dinner show arrives. Richie, Ralph, and Potsy's band perform Oh Boy.
Stars appear and the shadow is falling, and you can hear my heart a-calling.
After which they go backstage, where Al is panicking despite everything going smoothly. Joni, who is serving as Randy's assistant, initially doesn't want to go on because her sparkly attire makes her look like a bike reflector. Potsy says the audience is full of hunks, and Joni changes her tune. Randy starts to cough.
I'll get some water.
Oh, good.
Nerves. Happens every performance.
That's all right. Potsy's getting you some water there.
Potsy grabs him what he thinks is a glass of water, and then after Randy downs it, turns out to have been straight vodka. Randy, who normally doesn't drink, faints. Al comes back out, calmer but annoyed at the corny jokes Howard is telling.
We're running late. I mean, your dad was out there telling a bunch of corny jokes. Now who's next on the schedule?
Randy, thoroughly drunk, stands up and clings to Al for balance. As Howard tells a joke about a kangaroo at a bar, Marion joins him on stage to signal that something is wrong.
Marion, I'm right in the middle of a joke.
Oh, everybody knows that joke, Howard.
Oh?
Howard tells the audience to finish their tapioca pudding and rushes backstage to get an explanation and also try to strangle Potsy. Richie urges him to stall as they try to sober Randy up. Howard doesn't want to put Ralph or Potsy on, though. That wouldn't be a stall, but a dead stop. Joni suggests one of Howard's war stories.
They take forever, Dad.
And Howard goes back on stage. Fonzie joins everyone, and upon hearing about their dilemma, says they just need to find another magician. He pulls a red scarf out of his pocket, and with a flick of his wrist, turns it into a baton, then pulls a bouquet of flowers out from behind his head.
Oh, that's wonderful!
On stage, Howard introduces the fantastic Fonzie. With Joni's help, he removes the blossoms from a bouquet of flowers and then out of nowhere replaces them. Then he steps into the disappearing box, and after Richie and Ralph turn it all the way around, Fonzie is still there, but joined by a pretty girl with whom he is making out.
You brought me back a little soon.
He next does the floating woman trick, with Marion as the floating woman. That's not enough to satisfy the audience.
We want danger. Give us the milk can escape.
Please, please, can't you see I'm in a trance here?
Backstage, the amazing Randy still hasn't sobered up, and Howard is afraid they'll have to give the audience their money back. The orphans Louie and Louise show up to say the show is going great. And also, Fonzie can probably do the milk can escape. He can do anything. Fonzie is flattered, but there are only 3 people in the world who can do it. One of them is dead, one of them is in the hospital, and one of them is smashed out of his gourd. Louise reminds him that the orphanage needs the money, and despite Howard and Marion saying that it's too dangerous, Fonzie tells them to prepare the milk can.
Just prepare the milk can, you know?
Yay!
On stage, Richie, Ralph, and Potsy are preparing the trick, and Ralph cracks that he would hate to be the cow to fill this can. Someone in the audience shouts to put Ralph in the can. Fonzie comes on stage and announces that the can is solid steel, and the same one Houdini used. He climbs in, and Richie and Howard shut the can and ready all the locks.
Get the lock.
Get it down.
Belly down.
I got this one.
Yeah, this one's a little stuck.
The amazing Randy stumbles on stage after Fonzie has been inside for 40 seconds, shouting that he has to be let out or he'll drown, as everyone starts to panic because none of them remember who has the key, and Al runs on stage with an axe. The curtains suddenly lift, showing Fonzie sitting on top of the can, alive and not drowned. After the show, everyone is backstage to listen to George Fenneman's review on the radio. Plus, according to Howard, they made over $12,000. Joni wants to learn how to do the milk can escape to attract hunks, though Fonzie and Richie tell her not to risk her life like that. The amazing Randy, suffering through his first hangover, makes the radio disappear before they can hear Fenneman's review.
Oh, listen, this music is driving me nuts. Do you mind if I get rid of it?
Everyone is impressed except Al. It was his radio. Then Randy tells Fonzie he really saved the day.
Thank you, Peter. That was The Magic Show, which first aired back on December 5th, 1978. Happy Days was followed that night by a new Laverne and Shirley, in which the girls mistakenly think that they've been asked to dinner by 2 rich doctors.
It's so très elegant. Oh, sure, we hit the mother lode tonight.
NBC had an episode of Grandpa Goes to Washington, in which information from Grandpa's personal files is published before being verified. And CBS had a new episode of The Paper Chase, in which activist Elizabeth Logan starts a controversy by asking the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court why he's never hired a female law clerk. The episode guest starred Alan Napier, aka Alfred Pennyworth from Batman. So, Peter, of those 3 choices, what are you watching?
I mean, probably this one, just for the novelty of a magic show themed episode of Happy Days, but I admit the Paper Chase does sound intriguing.
I probably would have watched Happy Days and Laverne and Shirley too. The lure of a magic show on Happy Days would have been too much to ignore. The Magic Show was directed by Jerry Paris, and it was written by a guy named Don Safran. Don was a writer, producer, and publicist from Brooklyn. This was Don's only Happy Days script and his only sitcom credit ever, though he later acted as a unit publicist for Gary Marshall's film, Nothing in Common.
A Raystar production of a Gary Marshall film. It's a comedy and a drama, just like life.
Don wrote the 1982 movie Homework with Joan Collins and served as a writer and associate producer on the 80s action show Blue Thunder. Don died in 2014. As for guest stars this week, we have George Fenneman as himself. George was a radio and TV announcer best known for being the sidekick and straight man to Groucho Marx on the 1950s game show You Bet Your Life.
And now, here he is, the one, the only... Imagine getting him on Valentine's Day. Oh, that's me.
George was also well known as the announcer on the police drama Dragnet, with Jack Webb, first on the radio and then on TV.
The story you are about to see is true. The names have been changed to protect the innocent.
George's other screen credits include 77 Sunset Strip, Batman, Gomer Pyle, The Simpsons, and That Girl, plus the movies Ocean's 11, Big Jake, and How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying. George died in 1997. So, Peter, what did you think of George Fenneman as himself?
He was a pretty fun straight man in the opening scene, with the chaos going on around him, and you can tell that he's just annoyed, and he just wants to get this over with, and then the radio equipment explodes.
Well, I think we're off the air.
Thank goodness.
I think that the opening scene is an all-time great one for Happy Days, and I think that George Fenneman really ends a degree of gravitas for it.
I think so too. It's so fun having the Dragnet guy on Happy Days, being adorably exasperated with the Cunninghams and Richie's dumb friends. Our main guest star is James Randi as the Amazing Randi. James Randi was a world-famous stage magician and skeptic who really did perform under the name The Amazing Randi, but who was even better known as a debunker who offered a $1 million prize to anyone who could demonstrate supernatural abilities under scientifically controlled conditions. James appeared numerous times on The Mike Douglas Show and The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, but most of his screen credits were in documentaries debunking so-called psychics and faith healers.
The Amazing Randi maintains that you did not use psychic power, but that it was trickery.
He himself was the subject of the 2014 documentary An Honest Liar.
A conjurer, prestidigitator, liar, cheat, and fake.
The life of Harry Houdini reads very similar to the life of James Randi.
He died in 2020 at the age of 92. So, Peter, what did you think of James Randi as the Amazing Randi?
He was pretty great in this episode. I don't think that he got to do a ton, even though he's the big famous guest star playing himself alongside George Fenneman, but he got to make a radio disappear at the end, and he got to hang upside down in a straitjacket when he first showed up, so that was fun. And I love the implication that he apparently already knows Fonzie. How did they meet? Does it have anything to do with the sudden stage magic skills that Fonzie shows in this episode?
In fact, I wondered how this episode came about in the first place and whether it had anything to do with Henry Winkler just being interested in magic in real life. I was very impressed with the performance of James Randi as the Amazing Randi. He didn't really do a lot of acting, but he gets right into the swing of things on a sitcom, and he's able to say his dialogue pretty funny, and he's able to keep up the pace of the scenes. And of course, he makes a great entrance in this episode, hanging upside down outside a hotel window. I don't know how you can beat that. So I was just delighted to have James Randi on this show. Gary Marshall's real kids, Scott and Kathleen, appear as Louie and Louise, the orphans. We've seen them before in Haunted, Fonzie's Hero, and Fonselectomy. Some viewers say that they can see Scott and Kathleen mouthing each other's lines in this episode. Any comment on Gary Marshall's kids, Scott and Kathleen?
They're cute kids, and they accomplish what they set out to do, in that they inspire Fonzie to risk life and limb so that they can get a new Alvin and the Chipmunks record.
What about Fonzie? He can do anything. Please, Fonzie, you've got to do it.
Yeah, I think they did a pretty good job on this, considering, again, they're not actors. They do a pretty good job saying the lines and keeping the scenes going. We have another relative in the cast this week, sort of. An uncredited Clint Howard is the voice of the disgruntled audience member who keeps heckling the show.
Boy, I'd hate to be the cow that had to fill this. Put him in it! Hurry up, Pops, you're getting hostile.
Oh my God, that was him? He was delightful.
Clint is really one of the funnier running jokes in this episode. As for songs this week, Anson Williams sings a bit of the song Venus. That was a #1 hit for Frankie Avalon in 1959.
Venus, if you will, please send a little girl for me to thrill.
And I just learned the real Frankie Avalon is eventually coming to Happy Days. Anson Williams also performs Oh Boy, which reached #10 for Buddy Holly and the Crickets in 1958. This is the third Buddy Holly cover of this season, and I think this was the most successful, personally. I think Anson did a pretty good job with Oh Boy, but what did you think of it?
Oh Boy is just a fun, bouncy song, and there's not really much you can do to screw it up. Side note, I have a theory that Oh Boy might be one of the first gay love songs in English, just because it kind of sounds like he could be singing it to a dude, what with all the oh boys.
The Amazing Randi sings How Dry I Am.
How dry I am. He sings too?
This is actually a small part of a larger song called The Near Future by Irving Berlin. The song is often used in TV shows and movies to indicate drunkenness, especially in Warner Brothers cartoons.
Nobody knows how dry I am.
And I knew it from the 1960s horror film Blood Feast. I guess that's one of those cliches that's kind of fallen by the wayside, and people don't even remember what How Dry I Am was anymore.
As a culture, we should bring it back. Not us personally. But I mean, we could try.
We could try, yeah. As for cultural and historical references, obviously we have another reference to the Pfister Hotel, a real-life Milwaukee landmark.
The Leopard Lodge's annual Sunnyside Orphanage fundraising dinner show, being held tomorrow night at the Pfister Hotel.
Howard says that this is not person to person.
Welcome to our lovely home. Would you like to see upstairs?
Marion, this is not person to person.
He's referring to a CBS News show that ran from 1953 to 1961. Edward R. Murrow famously hosted that show until 1959. Person to Person was presented live. Murrow would interview celebrities and tour their homes with a camera crew.
Dean Martin, his wife Jean, and the 7 young Martins live in this frame and fieldstone house in Beverly Hills, California. I think it's only about 3 miles from the nearest golf course. Evening, Dean.
Good evening, Ed.
I did hear a parody of it called Person to Pearson by comedian Stan Freberg, so that's where I knew it from.
Good evening. I'm Edward Anonymous. The name of the record is Person to Pearson.
The milk can escape really was performed by Hungarian-American illusionist Harry Houdini as part of his act. Some sources say he was performing the trick as early as 1901, but most accounts of his life say he added the milk can escape to his act in 1908 in St. Louis. Either way, it was advertised with the slogan, "Failure means a drowning death."
Oh, wow.
James Randi is among the magicians who performed the trick since Houdini's death. Looking into it, I did find out how the milk can trick is performed.
How?
They put all the locks around the outside, right? You see that. But you can easily open the lid from the inside.
Oh, yeah. That makes sense. So all the locks are just for show.
Louis says that the orphanage's Alvin and the Chipmunks record wore out. Singer-songwriter David Seville had been releasing music under the Chipmunks name since 1958. At first, it was just singles. The Chipmunks' debut album, Let's All Sing with the Chipmunks, arrived in 1959. I hope that the kids at least had an album. It would kind of be sad if their one worn-out Chipmunks record was just a single.
It really would be. Imagine you're an orphan and you don't even have a full Alvin and the Chipmunks album.
You just have the same 2 songs over and over again. Marion mentions the Andy Hardy movies.
This is just like an Andy Hardy movie.
All-American boy Andy Hardy was played by Mickey Rooney in a very popular series of films from 1937 to 1946.
Dad, I don't understand these modern girls.
In what way?
Well, Polly, for instance. Sometimes she won't let you kiss her at all. But this other one is Cynthia. She'll let you kiss her whenever you want. She won't go swimming, she won't play tennis, she won't go for a walk. She just wants to kiss you all the time. I'm a nervous wreck.
But the character originated on the stage and was first played by Charles Eaton. I've been theorizing that Andy Hardy was an influence on Richie Cunningham, and this offers some proof to support that theory.
I figure that wasn't really so much of a theory as it was pretty blatant. They're very much cut from the same cloth. If nobody has confirmed it out loud, I feel like that's only because they don't need to.
I guess this makes the connection official. They gave Andy Hardy an official shout out. The Blackstone Hotel is a famous 21-story hotel on Michigan Avenue in Chicago. It was built in 1909 and remains in business today. It has been added to the National Register of Historic Places. The stock footage that we see really is of Michigan Avenue, but it's a little bit down the street from the Blackstone Hotel. That poster that says, "The Amazing Randy, the man no jail can hold," is a real one that James Randi used to promote his act. Randi supposedly hid the words Harry Houdini somewhere in the artwork, and you might notice too that Randi has dragon wings coming out of his back.
It's pretty bitchin'. That is artwork that you would put on the side of a van.
Other observations, I love that the episode starts with Ron Howard telling us that there was no trick photography and that the magic was performed live. It makes me feel like the episode is special right from the beginning. So to me, it was a little odd that the orphanage sent over 2 orphans for the radio show, and then the orphans just hang around the Cunningham's house for a while. Was this to show them what it would be like to have a family?
I can't decide if that's a nice thing to do or a mean thing to do. Dangling what it would be like to have a real house with a non-leaky roof and more than one Alvin and the Chipmunks record in front of these children's noses and snatching it away.
And then the kids are forced to paint posters for their own benefit show?
What the hell, Leopard Lodge?
I was genuinely impressed with how well James Randi said his lines while hanging upside down.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. I'm the Amazing Randy.
I tried 2 experiments while reviewing this episode. I tried hanging upside down off the side of my couch for the length of that scene. It is really, really not comfortable to do because the blood all goes to your head.
I would assume as much.
And then I tried holding my breath for as long as Fonzie is underwater in the milk can.
Oh, no.
And that is also very uncomfortable. So props to James Randi and Henry Winkler. What kind of audience would get unruly at a fundraiser for orphans?
Folks, let me have your attention.
A really terrible one.
Well, $16 to them would be $144 to us.
Oh, God. I guess that makes sense. I guess if I paid that much for a fundraiser dinner, I would also want to see someone risk their life for my own amusement.
But would you ask for a refund if they didn't do the milk can escape?
No, of course not. I'd hate to do that to the orphans.
But the show's $12,000 profit translates to $108,000 in today's money, so this was a very successful fundraiser. The darkest line in the episode is Marion's line, "You're young, dear. You'll get used to the disappointment."
The only way that line could have been darker is if she said it to the orphans.
Now I wish she had. That would have been a great scene. And there's a fun little moment near the end of the episode when Kathleen Marshall slips on the water from the milk can, and I was glad that they left that in instead of doing a second take.
Yeah, it's a nice touch of realism in a show that is not very realistic.
Except for the magic. That was all real.
Oh, yeah.
So Peter, were there any outstanding Happy Days fashions this week?
I liked the outfit that Fonzie wore when he was doing the milk can escape. He's wearing a black shirt, and he's also wearing what look like waders, but the skinny jean version of waders.
I was wondering how you were going to describe this outfit because I didn't have words to do it, but skinny jean waders is exactly what those are.
They've also got attached feet, like footy pajamas, which I guess makes sense. You probably wouldn't want to wear shoes or socks into a milk can full of water.
So, Peter, I will ask that age-old, timeless question. Was this episode any good?
This episode was delightful. Even besides the magic tricks, which are genuinely very fun, there was also just a lot of really funny stuff in it. I loved the opening with everyone just getting more and more unruly during the radio interview until the equipment explodes. I loved the running gag of Ralph and Potsy shamelessly promoting themselves and their shticks. I loved the guy from the audience heckling. It's just a really fun episode.
I had a huge smile on my face with this whole show. This was one that was very easy for me to watch twice for review purposes. I want to believe that the cast was having a lot of fun doing this episode as well. And I think the fun was even augmented by having Gary Marshall's real kids and Ron's brother working on the episode as well. And Henry gets to put on a magic show. What more could you say? This episode has no real serious themes in it. It does not bring up any issues at all, other than the treatment of orphans, I suppose. It's just a really goofy and fun episode. And a lot of times that's my favorite kind of Happy Days episode, is when it just is pure fun. I think my favorite single aspect of it was that Richie, Potsy, and Ralph just could walk into James Randi's hotel room.
It was 1960. It was a different time.
And then they decide to just mess with all of his stuff, which I thought was great. That he just has all this magic falderall, all these props and tricks all around his hotel room. I think it's Potsy who says, "Let's play." That is awesome, because that's what I would want to do. I was very delighted to have James Randi as a guest star in Happy Days, because I've watched a lot of debunking videos on YouTube. His footage is obviously a big part of that. Watch James Randi debunking Uri Geller.
In the early 1970s, Geller became a superstar, the most famous psychic in the world.
Okay, just a second, look at me. Visualize everything that you drew once more.
That is a fascinating video. So yeah, this is one that I very heartily recommend. If it comes up in rotation on reruns, definitely give the magic show a try. So Peter, how can people keep up with us and find out about all the wonderful things that we are doing?
Listeners can follow us on Twitter at Fonzie Podcast. They can follow me on Twitter at Peter Volfranc. That's PeterVulfranc.
And they can follow me on Twitter at Joe_A_Blevins. They can find this podcast online at thesedaysofours.libsyn.com. And they can email us with questions, comments, and concerns at thesedaysofourspodcast@gmail.com. So, Peter, what do we have on the docket for next week?
Next week, Richie gets in trouble when he gets caught in a compromising situation during a school election. Richie Gets Framed.
Sounds pretty salacious. I'm already looking forward to it. So, see you later, alligator.
In a while, crocodile.
Nobody knows how dry I am. I pawned my hat, my coat and shoes for one good drink of Knoxville blues.
Oh, my, that's terrible. Yes, we understand.